the trends, the practices, and some of the case studies that are happening across our world on this panel. So in 2010, the World Business Council for Sustainable Development released Vision 2050, which is a landmark piece of work that laid out a pathway to a world in which all people will live well within the limits of the planet. The mining and the metal sector is an integral part of any foreseeable economy and society. And this sector faces increasing demands and expectations from various stakeholders towards a more sustainable world. Sustainable development is a well-documented and thought-of challenge for the planet in the years leading to 2050 and beyond. And today we will be breaking down and just covering some of the trends that the mining, the processing, and the waste management industry within the whole mining sectors are implementing with regard to the vision, Sustainable Vision 2050. On my panel today, I've got Dr. Bassan Nasri, who is an environmental consultant at FNRC. He's also a general manager of Scientific Business Solutions Group in the United Arab Emirates. He's also done a lot of extensive, amazing, impactful work in the field of alternative fuel and raw materials. I also have with me Ian Maxwell, who is an operating partner at Pacific Road Capital, which is a private equity company that specializes in mining private equity. And Ian sits on various boards, and he's got sustainability as one of his passions and impactful work that he's doing. And that includes him being on the chair of the ESG committee for Pacific Road Capital. I also have Youssef Yabera, who is a mining investor in the Ministry of Energy and Infrastructure in the United Arab Emirates. He has acquired extensive experience on environmental management for various projects on infrastructure and mining in the Arab Emirates. He's also presented various papers for the mining sector in the United Arab Emirates. Last but not least, I have William Witham, also known as Bill. William has held senior executive roles in the resources sector for over 3 decades across many countries. He is currently the CEO of AAMERC, which with a role that foresees and focuses on government sector advocacy and negotiating at the state and international levels. Everybody, welcome to our panel. So I'll start with questions on the sustainability sector, like what are Youssef, as who works currently in the Ministry of Energy and Regulations in the United Arab Emirates, what are the regulations and legislations that need to be in place to achieve the Sustainable Vision 2050? And where, in terms of your work, how are you aligning with Sustainable Vision 2050 for processing and for mining, for energy, and what other processes such as waste management are you aligning en route and in transit to achieving Vision 2050 on sustainable development? Youssef?
Good afternoon for everyone. Thank you for this introduction. Actually, the purpose of selecting this topic in the sustainability, as we discussed before, that we feel that the energy efficiency is a main part of the sustainability in general. And we think that we need to focus this or have a little bit focus on that, because we have so many mining industries. I'm talking about UAE, and we are in the Ministry of Energy and Infrastructure. We are doing follow-up with the mineral industries in UAE in general. So the reason why we selected this, that because we feel that the energy saving and benefits for the companies when they implement such systems, energy efficiency systems, will be huge on the long run. And we also believe that the energy management system have a major role or a vast role in the continuous energy performance and improvement. And we believe that the energy management programs will overcome all the barriers towards sustainability. So currently, there is no mandate for having the energy efficiency as a mandatory requirement in the mining industry. What we have now is the environmental laws and regulation. We have the Environmental Law 24 for 1999 and its executive orders and other ministerial decrees. We need to add such a provision about the energy efficiency. This will be in collaboration with the environmental agencies as well as the Ministry of Climate Change and Environment in UAE. We also do believe from our experiences, what we have seen or noticed during our last few years with we were exposed with the mineral industry that we have some experiences we need to showcase for these experiences because we have some cases they have achieved like 20-30%, for example, savings in the electricity consumption, and some of them they have started selling the power for their neighbors. So this energy efficiency systems is a major part of the sustainability because it's also have a good impact on the environment. Reduce the carbon footprint, reduce the cost, reduce the pollution, etc. So this is a very important issue from our perspective. We need to highlight in the next few years. We have to focus on it in cooperation with the private and government sectors.
All right. So, Dr. Basson, as an environmental consultant, do you think in the UAE, because I believe most of the environmental legislations and laws and anything that has to do with sustainability across the world, they're usually just the same. It's just that from one state to the other, we use with different regulations and, you know, gazette or paper, but they are usually just about profit, planet, people. Right? So in transit, as we go to Vision 2050 and actually also Vision 2030 of the United Nations Sustainable Development, do you believe the current legislations we have in the United Arab Emirates are enough to achieve that kind of vision for a better life for all and a well-balanced economic and social life for all? Are there any other legislations that will be reviewed? Are they enough? And are there other technologies that you believe will add more, like your waste management, mining? Are there other technologies that you are currently implementing in order to achieve Vision 2050? Please, we can't hear you.
Okay, well, sorry. When we talk about the main regulation in UAE, which issued in 1999 and their update in 2006, there is many clause and clear instruction about using waste as a sustainable solution to introduce it as alternative fuel or alternative raw material. But since 2014, there is a clear regulation, particularly for mining activity, which let's say tailor-made regulation for each industry. So the one which I think it's perfect for me in 2014, so regulation number 567, it's a ministerial decree. It's issued particularly to guarantee the sustainability for mining sector in UAE. Okay, there is a clear instruction and the obligation for investor and the industry leader to reuse waste as alternative resources in their industry, in addition to reducing the waste. Actually, they following a systematic way, following the hierarchy of control to either eliminate the waste or reduce the waste or recycle or reuse the waste. Otherwise, we have to go for co-processing option for waste. Also, last year in 2019, certain regulation for cement industry to substitute about 20% of their main fuel to be alternative fuel, and particularly for RDF. Refuse drift fuel, and now there is many project in going and many study to for cement industry, particularly in UAE, and also similar legislation in other Gulf country to start to implement this regulation. So I believe by Q1 2021, we'll see many initiative and many implementation on place, particularly in UAE, because we are aware that many of them is already implemented. When it comes to local government, the federal Ministry of Climate Change and Environment issues a regulation, and for local government, it depends on the implementation. Most of them, they are progressing very well, particularly the Emirates, which have a wide sector of quarry and crusher and cement industry, most of them in Northern Emirates, and they did great initiatives which well known and already announced in the internet in how to recycle and use their own waste to be used either as material for other industry or to be used as like instead of some material like edge protection. For example, they now using the used tire coming from heavy vehicle to be edge protection for their quarry and for their crushing area. In addition to also using the let's say the material or dust coming from handling of material to be used for different industry like paint industry or to reuse it again as a raw material for their own industry. So I believe the regulation in place, and now the implementation start to be very clear to everyone.
All right. And then in terms of the environmental impact that are currently being generated in the mining, on your mining sector and in the mining activities, how do you link them to the current global challenges?
The most known global challenge, which is let's say global warming, okay, it's coming mainly from the emission of some gases like CO2 and methane and other. So when we consider some mining activity which used to burn fuel like cement industry, gypsum and other industry, I think now they are full aware about the problem, because it's not touch only the government or the ministry, but touch every one of us. All of us now notice clearly the change in climate from year to year, and everyone now is scared about the global warming issue. The regulation, it's very clear, as I mentioned, there is a regulation already issued to replace the main fuel by alternative fuel, because alternative fuel reduce emission of CO2, and also let's say voluntary or because of the goodwilling of many of international cement industry, they start already to take initiatives to use, let's say, cleaner technology and to generate some of their energy using clean energy nowadays. And we have many initiatives already in place. And at the end of the day, now there is a regulation, and it's strict regulation, and it will be implemented the coming few months. So I believe they are on track, and also soon will feel as a result of this implementation, particularly when we have this coronavirus and most of the plant has been shut down. Everyone feel about the improvement in air quality and the emission, and there is many food on the internet showing one certain area in 2019 or 2018 and the same area in 2020, which is showing is a clear difference in air pollution. And I believe now is the right time to start to have it a sustainable way, respecting the regulation, and also convincing everyone this is the right way to follow in order to reduce and improve the global warming issue everywhere.
All right, thank you. So Yusuf, in terms of implementing, currently in South Africa, we've just rolled, okay, it's been already in the pipeline for a long time, but carbon tax for emissions and companies that have a lot of footprint on the environment. So in the UAE, what other legislations are there, and taxes and penalties for companies that leave a lot of environmental impact and society footprint in the country, in the state?
Actually, as mentioned by my colleague, Mr. Bassam, there is the environmental law, and there is one decree last year issued 2019 for the waste management. But generally, as we said, that the reference we have for the environmental issues in UAE is the Law 24/1999 and its amendments and executive order. This is what we do have. As incentives, as you mentioned, it's good to have incentive for the companies who are working for energy efficiency, for carbon reduction or pollution control like that. There are some incentives, but not maybe in the sense of rewarding or reduction of the fees or reduction of the, for example, the royalties or whatever. It is in some incentives like we used to have, for example, in 2011 until 2015, a yearly gathering for the companies who are working in the mining sector, and we award them, appreciate their work if they have succeeded or passed the criteria for the environmental impacts in general, but not particularly for the energy efficiency. Again, I'm talking about the energy efficiency. So, as we said, we need maybe to amend the current or the existing laws or regulations or mandates in order to put more incentives. And we have actually, in the Ministry of Energy and Infrastructure, we have proposed a new regulation to manage the mining sector, but still in the pipeline, and it needs some time to be ratified from all the local governments in UAE. And we came to mention the incentives, the environmental impacts, as well as the energy efficiency in particular. So we think very shortly we will be with a new vision of UAE 2071. Now we are preparing, the ministry is preparing the plan for 2071. We hope to come up with some regulation or mandates very soon.
All right. Thank you so much. So, Ian, as a fund manager and operating partner at one of the most impactful mining private equity firms, and with your passion and your involvement in ESG, from an investor perspective, what are the investors looking at when investing in the mining sector, when you're collaborating with whether junior contract or larger mining companies? What do you look at? Apart from the money part of it, what are the ESG criteria that you look at, and why are they important? What's your most important thing that you look at for that?
Yeah, let me answer that two ways, please, Elungalo. And I'd like to pick up on, first of all, the conversation that Youssef and Dr. Bassem were having,
Yes,
around processing. I mean, I think the reality is good businesses and good investments are synonymous.
Yeah.
And when you think about a good business and a good investment, what you think about is companies that can be run very efficiently, low unit costs, that get a very high capital productivity, a lot of output per unit capital, that manage their risk profile well, and ultimately have a positive contribution such that they have sustainability of cash flows over the long term. And when you think about the processing technology component we were just talking about, ultimately, if you can reduce energy consumption, if you can reduce water consumption, if you can reduce reagent consumption, ultimately you're going to get lower unit costs. How do you do that? We started looking at things like selective mining, thin seam, underground selective mining using remote equipment that we wouldn't be able to use in manned operations. We're starting to look across the industry at things like ore sorting. I looked at a project last year where they were able to reduce 60% of the feed to the mill by pre-crushing and sorting prior to putting it into the mill. If you think about that, that means ultimately you're only taking 40% of the material, so you only need 40% of the capital you might need. Or alternatively, for the same amount of capital, you get an awful lot more productivity out of that plant. We can see areas like risk reduction. Tailings, as you may be aware, is a massive issue globally at the moment. In 2019, Vale's Brumadinho disaster killed 270 people. And for many smaller companies, that could have been the end of the company. And the United Nations Education Environment Programme, UNPRI, and the ICMM have put in place a global tailings standard. And ultimately, that is moving towards dry stack tailings over the long term. And again, by sensible processing, you can also reduce the risk in key areas like tailings management. And then finally, we look at sustainability as being, if you're making a positive contribution and the world sees that, that will provide longevity of profits. And that, of course, is important. But I think beyond that, when we think as an investor, we think about the connection of companies with the SDGs and how integrated their strategies are with the SDGs. You know, our investors into Pacific, we're an investor, but obviously we have investors that invest into us and we deploy their capital. We're a specialist investor in medium-sized mining companies. And so what we're looking for is we're looking for well-managed businesses that understand the needs of society, integrate that into their strategies, and ultimately create a platform that is competitive for the long term. And that means for us being very transparent around their disclosure, you know, being very clear about how they positively impact the SDGs, where they negatively impact them, and how they plan to use that as a platform for continuous improvement. A real focus around corruption, human rights and indigenous rights, where they intersect with business. Clearly around tailings, air, water and rehabilitation, health and safety, but then also around, you know, the economic and community contributions that the companies make, because in many areas, for example, around SDG 1 poverty, you know, mining is a big employer. It puts a lot of money into the tax and royalty system, a very positive impact. So I think the starting point for us and the access to all of that is companies that integrate the SDGs and are prepared to report and disclose transparently and openly on their position, because that really is the access for continual improvement. And of course, continual improvement also means ongoing continual returns to investors.
Oh, wow. Okay. So that sounds very amazing. William, when, because I understand that at AMAC, you work across trades between Africa and other countries and in Australia. So what kind of sustainability do you believe that sustainable mining practice and investment practices and companies and states that believe in the core of the Vision 2030 for the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal and our Vision 2050, is that one of your most important things when you look at forging relationships and your deal building, or how important is sustainable business for you, and why is it important for the next 5 years and the next 20 years?
Yeah, thank you. No, it is very important. I think it's very interesting. The other panelists have been talking about the perspectives. The first speakers are talking, I guess, focused on the Middle East, and which is obviously rich in energy, and a lot of the sustainability is around energy and climate change, that type of thing. But as Ian mentioned, I think sustainability is, it means a lot of different things, and it really is about people at the end of the day. So for us, for Australian companies that are working in Africa, it is around, you know, the international standards now are very important for Australian companies. If you're looking for an investment, as Ian said, you need to comply with, say, the IFC, the International Finance Corporation's standards. We have the Equator Principles, which are now, for anybody lending, they have just been upgraded the last week. So there's an incredible amount of standards which are taking us in the right direction. In some ways, I don't think mining, to say sustainable, a lot of people now talk about responsible mining, because, you know, when you have a mine, you are taking material out. You cannot put that material back, but you can make it responsible, and you can make sustainable communities around it. So I'd like us to, if you focus on the people around the mine, the people of the country, then addressing those SDG goals, that makes your enterprise a good, sustainable community development enterprise. And I think that's what the world wants to see. It's about looking after the people in all these countries and those communities around those mines. That's where we want to be. And it will be driven by the investors, but it will also be driven by the communities, and it'll be driven by the consumers as well. So you'll see some products, especially the new battery type materials, where the end consumers, be they computer users or car users, they will be driving back down the line to ensure that those materials are sustainable. And new terms like the circular economy or responsible mining, as I said, that's going to be the new lexicon. It's going to be about, you know, not having waste or using waste in a practical way, or building new enterprises or industries around those mines to ensure that there is a circular economy for everybody. So, yeah, I think that away from the energy hub of the Middle East, and people need to also be much more innovative. And I think you'll see that in Australia and Africa, for example, the use of solar energy, for example, in generating electricity is going to be very important into the future. And I see that as the major change in terms of technology.
All right. So for either you or Ian, when moving from one state to another, do you find synergy, or like how are the SDGs well applied from your clients across the world? Do you believe we are on track? Do you believe there's more that needs to be done in terms of the different sectors and the different countries that you work with and states? Like, are we on the right track in terms of sustainable development vision 2030 and 50?
Yeah, I think we are on the right track. I mean, it will take a long time, and I think we need to have goals along the way. Most of our members, when they look at the Sustainable Development Goals, you can't pick all 17, but you can pick 3, 4 or 5 of them. And if you can do those and do those well and then achieve those goals, I think then we can go to the next stage. So I think sometimes it seems such an enormous thing, but if we can just pick off pieces and pick them and then address them one by one, we will get there. And I've seen great progress already made in alleviating poverty, including diversity, education, water, cleaning up waterways, all those things. If everyone can just pick a few of them around their projects, we will get there in the end. But it will take time.
All right. Yeah.
Well, I think, from my perspective, when we think about the industry, clearly we have government, we have the companies themselves, and that includes large, medium and smaller companies. And then, of course, the NGO sector as well. And they all come together to influence what we do. I mean, I think what we can clearly say is the larger companies are very much heading in the right direction. Big improvement in what they've achieved. And I think there's real industry leadership there. And I think some of that's being recognized by people like the Responsible Mining Foundation, an NGO that focuses on mining. So, for example, Anglo-American, BHP Billiton doing very good things in that space. I think with investor interest, you see the Tailings Initiative and the Tailings Summit, which was ultimately sponsored by the UNEP, PRI and ICMM, but was really led and initiated by the Church of England and the Swedish State Pension Fund Council of Ethics. And as you know, some of the state pension funds, some of the biggest investors in the world, taking a very active interest, saying, look, we understand mining is critical for energy transition for the future. We can't just take a step back and say we're not going to invest there anymore. We need to be more active, and they ultimately came through with the tailings standard. And there's huge government support for that as well, NGO support. I think, so that's in the bigger companies. I think once you get down into the mid-tier mining companies, the scene is very mixed. And we really do see the good, the bad and the ugly in that space. And there's real differentiation between some of the mid-tier companies doing very good things and some that are still living, in under a past view of how the world should be. And I think there's a lot more room for improvement there.
Wow. All right. And in terms of the resources that we have in the mining industry, which one do you think, for example, water, waste? I still believe waste, this goes for all of you gentlemen on the panel. The kind of resources we have, water, energy, the other one, waste, because I believe waste is a waste, but it's also a resource, as Dr. Bassan and Yusuf has already stated that they're using waste like circular economy and for their waste streams and waste management, which I know there's a lot of papers that have been written in the for mining sector in terms of our resources, but which one do you believe is the one for sustainable development? Like in a community, if you were to invest in a community or work in a community or on one of your host mines, which resource will you implement first for those people for sustainable development to deal with the SDGs and all? Is it electricity, alternative electricity, or water? I mean, because I believe as much as we making money in our mining activities, investing, I've seen, as you've said, there's companies that are way ahead of their time and doing well on the sustainability mining. I know Anglo-American here in South Africa, in Mogalakwena, they've done a lot of work. And I'm saying this because I've seen one of their water projects that just was so sustainable that it led to a multiple improvement in the community, right? And I was like, oh, this water, water reticulation project by a mining company. Now people have water, now people have agricultural activities, and they can create jobs. And women are no longer jobless. They can run their own farms because now they have water. Because in Africa, and I believe other parts of the world, water is one of the scarcest, most not there commodity. But with your experience working from state to state, from legislation and ministries for USAF and Bason, which is the next amazing resource in our natural resources sector that we can make sure that we implement in our society to make sustainable impact that will last longer and bring with it multiple ripple effect of solutions to fight poverty, to fight inequality, for better life for all.
Okay, see, I'm always using the word the waste is waste because we are wasting it, because I believe all type of waste is considered resources, and it depends on the each mining activity. But there is common material, it can be common between all the type of industry. Very simple, the rejected material from the industry itself, it's raw material. The investor already invest to get this material, but sometimes they waste it because of the wrong handling or wrong management of this raw material. If we take quarry, crusher, cement industry or whatever, the wasted limestone and the quartz and other material, it's raw material. So if we manage this material well and re-inject it again, to recycle or reuse, so we already have resources. If we take the common type of waste in any industry, the wood, the tires from mobile equipment, plastic, even the general waste from the day-to-day use for employee, the used grease, used oil, metal scraps, all this long list, whatever hazardous or non-hazardous waste, even the wastewater, all these resources can be used again. I can give you a simple example of the value of what I have mentioned already, which is the value of energy. For example, 1 kilogram of normal waste, which is generated from the employee offices, whatever, after any type of meal, it's about it's giving about 10 megajoule if it has been burned or reused as alternative fuel. 1 kilogram of carbon, which is generated from many industry, is about 30 megajoule. Even the wood, which very common in mining industry, because of the wooden pellets, it's about 15 megajoule, and many other material. The tire itself, it's from 28 to 30 gigajoule. So this common type of waste, if it treated well and pre-treated to be injected as alternative resources, it can get a good value. That's why now most of investors or businessmen put in their minds sustainable business thinking. Before he decide to do the project, he decide to see how he is going to do with his waste. And now, alhamdulillah, most of the municipality and the authority understand well the story, and they ask the investor to give the solution at the beginning when he is in the phase to make the environmental impact assessment study, requesting him to give the list of all type of waste, the quantity and the yearly generation, and what is his plan for this waste. Many of them now not allow to open landfill for some certain type of industry, because you know that the waste coming from this industry, it can be reused or recycled, or at least to be co-processed to get alternative fuel or alternative raw material. Even the water itself now, with simple technology, wastewater treatment, I can get fresh water, which I can sell it or use it in internal roads, to watering internal roads, and even the sludge, it has some value of energy which can be used as alternative energy as well. Those are just a simple example for common waste coming from mining sector.
Okay, anyone on the panel?
I will add one thing, that we in the Ministry of Energy and Infrastructure, we have issued the Energy Strategy 2050. It was in 2017. So we have a plan for energy diversification within the next 30 years. Now, currently, for example, we have like 35, maybe 38% of non-conventional fuel energy sources. Now we are planning to increase this for another maybe 45. Like I'm just giving an example, but the exact figures can be maybe shown on the website to see the exact figure. So now we have searching for alternative sources like solar panels. Also, UAE has also huge potential for solar panels, even geothermal energy as another source of energy. This is one thing. The second thing, also the ministry has issued the UAE water strategy 2036 because water is scarce and we are here in arid area. So we think that water is very valuable and we need to conserve it mainly in the main consumption sector, which is the industrial sector. So these were the initiatives done by the ministry in 2017, and we issued these strategies for future. And we hope that and we believe that we'll achieve the sustainable development goals by following the strategies in the next few years. We will, inshallah, achieve the SDGs by 2030.
Right, we have about 4 minutes left. Any thoughts?
Can I just say one more thing to that? And it goes to something that Bill said earlier, which I think is very important.
Yes.
The mining industry makes a very positive impact on people's lives.
It does. Yeah.
You look at everything that we use around the world today, most of that has some sort of mining industry input into it. It's inconceivable, for example, we could be having a conversation about electric vehicles without thinking about mining and raw materials. So it is a real positive contributor. I think the real issue is how do you make mining as responsible as possible? That ultimately comes down to leadership, putting the right operating systems and practices and people in place to deliver. But I think the most important entry point for a high sustainability conversation going forward is going to be that companies are transparent in reporting their current position and not being afraid to be transparent and only report the positives, but report all impacts they have, because that really is the access point for continual improvement. And that's ultimately what we all want in this space.
Yeah. All right. We don't have, I think this time was very short. Anyway, thank you very much. Let me just check if we have some questions in our chat. We don't have questions, but let me check. We don't have questions, but this will be rolling over. They will put our panel up the website and people will still be viewing and probably dropping us emails or questions as we go on. Thank you very much. This was such a beautiful, impactful panel, and I hope we all continue. We all are doing amazing things in the mining sector. As Ian has said, mining sector is one of the biggest economical contributors, and it builds societies. It has created a lot of jobs. It has changed a lot of lives. And what we just need to do now is to just make sure that we mine responsibly. We mine more responsibly in line with what our planets need, because also our future generations want to come. We need our next 100 generations to come back here and still mine and still have the natural resources and still have a better life for themselves and our lineages as we go on. Thank you very much, gentlemen. This was amazing, and it was very beautiful to meet you. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much for your time this morning. The sessions will continue in just a few minutes, so please do